I'm just sitting here in the garage drinking my morning cup of coffee, enjoying the breeze. First day off of the week. I've got like 4 or 5 projects going on that I don't feel like starting. Not because I'm lazy, just because they're all at a stupid point. That's just the next thing I have to do is stupid, you know? And after spending the whole week at work being stupid, it's hard to motivate myself to be stupid on the weekends. But I've got a truck full of garbage out of my barn, and after traveling the country, all the different culture, you don't really know what the landfill culture is locally. You know, waste management. You don't really know what the waste management culture is here. Um, but all things are indicators of what's going on, you know, in the local environment. I noticed as soon as I got to Alabama that there's just trash everywhere. Every side road off the main road will have a couple of mattresses laying there, a few couches, maybe a barrel full of dead animals. It's pretty trashy down here. You see people throwing shit out of their windows still. It's really people literally just throw shit out of their windows when they're driving down the road here in Alabama still. Anyway, um, yeah. So I mean, if you see trash along the roads, like large piles of trash, it's probably a pretty good indicator that whatever waste management system they've got going on is chaotic and probably, you know, a very big hassle to try to use. I should have I should have read the tea leaves on that one. But anyway, I've got a truck bed full of random shit out of the barn. Got a couple of used tires. I've got all the countertops that they took out of this house when they replaced them. Apparently, at some point in time, they thought maybe they wanted to switch back or something. I don't know. But they managed to carry them all up into the top of the barn. They're heavy. And they put a lot of work into carrying them into the top of the barn. I know because I put a lot of work into carrying them back out of the top of the barn. And I had gravity on my side. Anyway, I figured I looked up a local landfill here. Um, yeah, and I found it on the maps. And I was like, before I drive over there, and they tell me, you know, whatever chaotic process they have in place to throw shit into a hole in the ground. I called them and I said, hey, I've got a truck full of random garbage that I cleaned out of the top of my barn. It's got some scrap metal in it. It's got some cans in it. It's got some tires. It's got some wood. The guy says, we don't take tires. Okay, check box one. He's like, we take scrap metal, but you got to separate it. I said, okay. Is there a place there where I can separate my pile of garbage? He says, no. I just weigh the entire pile of garbage. And if there's scrap metal in it, then you don't get paid for it. But if you bring in a truck full of scrap metal, then I'll pay you for it. Okay, so that means I got to go through the pile of garbage in the back of my truck and pull the metal out. I'm old enough, I should have known better than to even put all of it in the truck at one time. But I did. Um, so yeah, I've got a truck full of shit that I need to go through now and sort through. And then the guy says, where are you coming from? And I said, Eva. Oh yeah, we don't take anything from Eva. You got to go to Coleman. Coleman's like 40 miles away from my house. Eva's like 5. So when I go over there, I know what to say next time. Anyway, unless they check I don't know how he would know where the fuck I'm coming from. And what would you say? I just be like, I'm moving this junk from my friend's house who lives in town, whatever. So yeah, it's either that or just put it in a big pile out somewhere in the corner of my property and just have a junk pile of my own. But then I looked up where I could take tires to recycle them. And that's about 60 miles away. So I'm pretty sure that my 4 lawnmower tires are just going to sit somewhere in my fence row now too. Or I could just find a nice alcove off one of the main roads and just dump it there. It's not my trash. None of it has my address on it. But no, I'm not going to do that. That's the first job there that I'm not starting to do. Yeah. And then I got an estimate to put power out to my barn. So they sent me their estimate. Uh, their estimate is just a number on a piece of paper. It doesn't say what they're charging me for anything. There is no list of what they're charging me and why. Just $2,300 to run power to my barn, based on the verbal interaction that we had about putting a pole in and pulling 100 amps off my house service and running it out there, and putting in a panel and one outlet. So to run a line from my house, a pole, a panel, and one outlet, they wanted $2,300. As much as I'd like to do somebody else's job for them and then call back and say, okay, I don't want an itemized list of what you're charging me and why, I just said, fuck it, $2,300. I need power out there. Accept the offer. The other two contractors didn't show up, and then one of them called me at 1 o'clock to tell me they'd be out in 45 minutes, and I said that I was actually on my way to work, and they said, oh, well, thanks for letting us know. And I said, well, thanks for showing up Monday morning, which means somewhere between, 6 a.m. and noon. Not call me at 1 and tell me you'll be there in 45 minutes. So they were a no-call, no-show. The other guy just never called, never showed. So the company I'm dealing with now that wants to charge me $2,300 to run a line from my panel to a pole to a panel again and one outlet wants $2,300 to do that. So I called them back and I said, hey, I'd like to schedule, because I got to call them back to schedule my work, because they don't call you because they're not offering a service. So I call them back and I say, hey, I'd like to set up a time for you to come out here and do this work. And they said, oh, yeah, well, you're going to have to call the power company first to get an engineer out there to decide if they need to set a pole. And I said, I do that? Because when I talked to the guy that came out here to give me the estimate, he said, we are probably going to have to set a pole. He didn't say you or they, he said we, meaning them, the company that I'm hiring to do this work. So the girl I talked to, of course, she doesn't know anything about anything. She says she has to call me back, and then she says, yeah, you got to call the power company and get an engineer out there to see if they need to set a pole. I said, you don't set poles? She says, yeah, we set poles. I said, okay. She said, let me call you back. So she called me back again, and she says, yeah, you got to have the engineer out there and then have them set a pole. I said, do they do that at a charge? She said, yeah, they'll just add the charge to your electric bill. I said, well, the estimate you sent me doesn't have anything on there that I could actually decide whether or not the work's worth it. But I understood that you were going to set the pole, and I would think that you're the electrical company that I've hired to do this work, that you would call the power company. You would do the whole job, not I accept a job for $2,300 and then I also call the power company and I also schedule an engineer and I also pay for the power pole that they're going to set here that you also, I don't know. So she said, yeah, call us back when you get that set up. So I'm thinking about just not calling them back. Yeah, I'm just going with my gut instinct on this one. Just, paying you to put electricity to my barn. So fucking do that, You call them. You have the engineer come out, and then you get the power to the barn, and I pay you money and watch you do this. That's how I feel about it. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'm just becoming an old dickhead. So that's the second thing I got to deal with here today. Maybe. Yeah. I got time. So just drinking my coffee, sitting here being a dickhead. So my work's finally putting me on the shift that they hired me for, which is good. I don't have 4 days a week to walk around in circles out here in the middle of nowhere. That's where the whole transmission shop's coming in. So that's what this whole thing's leading to. That's why I'm trying to empty out my truck so that I can go out in the shed, so that I can tear down a little box out. It's a whole thing, but it starts with these few things. But they at work they wired up 3 radio frequency switches backwards, and I walk into the middle of everything all the time. And since I'm the only one on night shift they really trust to do anything and get it done, every problem comes directly to me. So basically all my jobs at work now have become troubleshoot fucked up shit that nobody really knows what's going on, you know? On your head upside down in the top of a fucking satellite. Everybody else gets to cut stickers and fucking label wires and shit, whereas I get to fucking go up and follow instructions that are written very, very concisely, but completely incorrectly. In other words, I have to follow these instructions like a robot. And if you do, you'll have failure on just about everything. So I walked into them going, oh, we got a hot job, man. It has to get done tonight. And I said, all right, fucking spill it on me. And they're like, yeah, these switches came from the vendor with the stickers on the wrong side so that all the pins are inverted. We wired all the pins backwards because there's 6 pins on the end of the switch. And the sticker's on one of the sides, and the switch is completely fucking, bilaterally similar. So you can't flip. If you flip it over, it looks exactly the same on both sides. There's no indicators, You would think making switches for fucking spacecraft, you would at least emboss like a T. I would say right top on it and bottom on the other side, but at a minimum, put a T on it. Or at a minimum, fucking hit it with a goddamn set punch and put a dent on it and say, hey, the dent's on the top. But no, they send you a switch with a sticker on it, and the sticker's got the wiring schematic for it. It tells you what the pins are on the back of it. All the pins are the same. The stickers were on the wrong side of the fucking switches, so the pins were wired completely, flipped. That's what the engineer told me, and that's what the technician told me, that they discovered it. And then they were like, so we need you to go up in the back of this fucking thing and cut all the wiring out, which has been wrapped in Kapton tape, which is like Scotch tape that's been impregnated with all kinds of magical shit. They wrap it with Kapton tape, the whole wiring harness with Kapton tape to shield it from space waves, from space particles. They don't really know if it does anything, but they do know that they like it, and they do know that they're not the ones that have to put it on and take it off, so they just say put it on everything. It doesn't rip. You have to unpeel it or cut it off. And if you try to unpeel it, you're unpeeling black tape that's as thick as Scotch tape. It rips like Scotch tape, It's pretty much exactly like it. But they've wrapped the entire wiring harness with this black Scotch tape. And you have to figure out which way they wrapped it. Because if you try to unwrap it backwards, it doesn't come off. So if you're trying to unwrap it and it's not coming off, you say, I must be unwrapping it the wrong way. So you got to go to the other end of the run of Kapton tape and try to wrap it back towards yourself, or whichever way it is. And mind you, you're up in the back of a fucking satellite with a monkey harness on, wearing rubber gloves that are ill-fitting, trying to unpeel Scotch tape off of a wiring harness with like telephone wiring in it, without cutting or nicking any wires. You're sitting in a hole that's about the size of your asshole, and you're working at a level that's down below where you're at. So you're like sitting Indian style, working 4 feet below yourself, kind of in the fetal position. Sometimes I lay on my back and work over my head, trying to unwrap Kapton tape. And it comes off in like 1/4-inch chunks at a time. And if you can get a good run to peel off, keep in mind they've put it on in 6-inch pieces, because if you have a whole 2-foot run of Kapton tape that you're trying to wrap around a wiring harness down in a satellite, it sticks to everything and you make a mess. So for me to get these wires exposed to rewire them, I had to cut the wiring harness out of the vehicle. I had to unwrap fiberglass tape from every point that it's mounted to the vehicle. And then I had to cut Kapton tape off the wiring harness, about 3-foot runs for 5 different switches. So it took me the better part of 6 hours standing on my head just to expose the wires. So I got a hold of the engineer, who goes home before me. He's not even at work anymore. So we're working without engineering support, using planning that they wrote, that they just use AI to copy and paste other planning. So they'll take like the assembly planning and just copy chunks of that and then try to put it in the planning backwards to take it apart. It doesn't work. They don't give a fuck, because they're not the ones that have to do it. But I have to stamp everything and verify everything, verify every torque wrench, verify every expiration date on the Kapton, all this stuff. So they make it completely impossible to do. So I texted the engineer. Of course, he didn't text back. I said, hey, bro, this ain't getting done tonight. I'm 6 hours in and I'm just getting the wires exposed. So the planning is not clear, but they want me to ohm out these switches to make sure that I'm doing it right. And I'm like, well, guy, you told me that the fucking switches have the labels on backwards. So all I have to do is rotate all the wires 360 and reattach them, right? So that's what I did. I just rotated all the wires 360 and reattached them. Well, I didn't reattach them. I relabeled them. And that's as far as I got in my 10-hour shift. And I put it in my little execution notes. Hey, guys, I rotated all the switch wires, as you guys were discussing, because the labels were on backwards. But I didn't get a chance to ohm the switches out. And the only thing I'm ohming out, it's either all right or all wrong. You know, the pins aren't going to be flipped and flopped. They're just twisted. You know, they're just mirrored on the other side of the switch. So all I have to do is move them with the same pattern: 1 to 5, 2 to 4, 3 to 6, right? To rotate them around the switch. And so I left in my shop notes, hey guys, I exposed the switches, I rotated the labels 360, based on the fact that you guys said the switches have the labels on the wrong sides. So I just mirror them to the other side, right? I didn't get a chance to ohm them out, but once you get up there and you get your head jammed down on that hole with an ohm meter, you can go ahead and pin out the fucking switches and say, yep, he flipped them. You know, we're good to go. So I had some help helping me unwrap because I couldn't sit in the fetal position any longer. So I had some help, and my helper was not a very intelligent guy. So rather than trying to unwrap the Kapton, he just yanked on it and pulled on it and then clipped on it with side cutters and scissors and all sorts of shit. And he chopped a wire off. So now we got a wire that's chopped off too short. So I have to write a fault for that. Anyway, so I went into work the next day, and both the engineers were like staring there at me like, you didn't get much done last night. And I said, yeah, I didn't, man. I was on my head for 6 hours unwrapping Kapton tape to rewire switches. And they kind of razzed me a little bit. And I was like, yeah, whatever, man. You know, they have no fucking clue what they're asking you to do. They just ask you to do it. So part of the job then is to, where I've unplugged these switches from the main wiring harness, go all the way back to the flight computer and unplug the flight computer and then ring out the wiring harness that goes to the switches. And I'm like, well, why are you guys doing that? They're like, well, we're not sure what the problem actually is. So we want to make sure the wiring harness is pinned out properly. And I was like, well, yesterday you guys were sure that the stickers were on upside down. And that was the problem, so that's what I corrected for. And they're like, yeah, they were all fucked up and you put the stickers on wrong. I was like, oh, cool. That's why we wanted you to ohm them out before you move the stickers. I was like, well, you had me ohming out every single switch in the exact same way, and you had me flipping, and then the very next step was flip the stickers. So I just flipped the stickers while I had my head down in the hole, and then I was going to ohm it out, which I had left a note saying do that. They're like, yeah, that's not what we meant to do. And I was like, that's cool. So they're ringing out this wiring harness now from the flight computer down to the fucking brake and the harnesses where all the labels are, where they're pinned together mid-harness, where I took them apart. And they're relabeling all the wires to make sense again. And I said to them, I was like, guys, if you knew what was wrong with the switches and you had a complete run and it's all been taped and it's all been fucking tested and it's all been checked and it's all been whatever, why don't you just repin the fucking connector at the flight computer? We could have just stood there and swapped pins. And no one's on their head, and you're not cutting a wiring harness out. And they're like, and I was like, yeah, no, well, you guys didn't fucking think of that. That's what happened. At whatever meeting you had, and you decided that you had these switches wired wrong. At that point in time, you cut your losses and say, okay, we got them wired wrong, but all the wires go to the same fucking place, and they're all the same gauge wire. They're all the same color wire. The only difference is these stickers that you're having me put on the fucking leads that get wrapped in this Kapton tape anyway, and you can't read once it's installed. So the only problem you were really having me do was expose stickers on wires that you can't see to move stickers, because you have to wring the wiring harness out anyway. Well, they were like, well, we don't know which way those fucking switches were wired wrong. And I'm like, well, you could find out by wringing them out just like you wanted me to do. But instead of doing them at the junctions in the middle of the fucking wiring harness, you could have done it up at the plug, you know? I mean, honestly, this is like helping a friend install a stereo in his car, and then he realizes he has the left speaker wire wired to the right speaker wire, right? Left being green, right, being purple or whatever it is, and then getting up to your head unit and going, hey, when I fade it left, it goes to the right speakers, and when I fade it right, it goes to the left speakers. Okay, what are you going to do? You going to tear your whole fucking car apart again? Pull out all the trim, pull out all the carpet, and move the wires so that the right color wire is going to the right speaker? No. You're going to repin the connector at the fucking head unit, right? Because you're not an idiot. That's what I'd do in my garage. But these guys wanted to change the stickers on the wires so that they made sense. Stickers that we put on, you know? Anyway, that's what they're doing. So they were ohming out the wiring harness, and then they put labels on it, and they said, hey, go ahead and put that back together tonight. And I said, okay. Well, the connectors are male and female, and the instructions written so badly that my 60 connectors, some switches have all male ends on them. Some switches have all female ends on them. Some switches are mixed with male and female. Well, now that we've unpinned them and swapped wires around, guess what? My fucking pins don't match anymore. So now I got to cut pins off wires and repin them and fix the wire that we snipped off short. So they write work instructions for that. But in order to do a pin crimp, they want to do a pull test. Every time you crimp a pin, you got to do a pull test. And the pull test has to be done with the proper connectors. So you connect a pin, you put it in a machine, and it yanks the connector out, and you record what force it used to yank the connector out. In my 30 years of aviation maintenance experience, we've never done that. We don't do that on helicopters that I flew on. We don't do that on jet engines that we build. We don't do that on fucking commercial aviation aircraft that you do. You pull on it with your hands. You use quality tools and quality crimps, and you get a good result. But not these guys, because this is a spacecraft. Spacecraft are going to be in 0G. There's not going to be forces imposed upon them once they are launched. You know, this just has to survive a launch. One time, you know, but again, it can't fail. So I got to do this pull test. 3 pull tests. So I got to find my crimpers, which are nowhere to be found. So I searched the facility for 2 hours to find crimpers. The crimpers aren't calibrated. If they were, I wouldn't have to do the pull test, but every 30 days. But I got to do one every time because my crimpers aren't calibrated because they don't fucking have a system in place to do that. So I find some crimpers. Then I find some wire that's the right gauge. They want to know what part number the wire is that I do the pull test on. So I find wire that has a part number on it. It's 24 gauge wire. Now I got to find the splices they want me to use. So the planning calls out the entire wrong splices. It calls out splices that aren't even the type of splices that I'm using. That's what they presented me with on the shop floor. Now you're not allowed to use parts that aren't in the bill of materials. They don't even have a bill of materials. They have one, but it's not populated. They don't use it, but I have to use it. I can only install parts that are on the bill of materials. So right off the bat, they're having me install parts that aren't in the bill of materials. Everybody does it. It's cool. Don't worry. We won't chop your dick off when we find out you're the one that put the wrong ones on. Yeah, they will. So they got the wrong crimps called out in the actual written instruction. They're not even in the bill of materials. So right there, it's like work stoppage. Just stop. You're not allowed to do it. But not me. I know. They fucked me over like this 27 times. So you just keep going. You just keep going. You write a shop note and say, hey, you guys fucked me, but I kept moving anyway. Now you got to buy this off. You either buy it off or write a fault, and then they cut it back out, but you got to buy it off. So I know what crimps they want to use, so I grab a bag of them. The only bag I can find doesn't have a part number on it now, so I don't even know what part number these crimps are. Different wire gauges, different pin lengths, different pin diameters, different coatings. They look like the ones that we normally use. So now I'm going to use crimps that I don't even know what part numbers I'm supposed to use. And I'm going to use physical crimps that I don't even know what part number they actually are. And I said, nah, I'm fucking done. Nope, I'm not moving forward. So I just stopped and wrote them a little text to my engineers. I wrote them separately because I didn't want them to know that I was diming each other. Because the one guy wrote the shitty planning and the other guy came up with the shitty plan. And I didn't want to embarrass them in front of each other for the retards they are. So I gave them both the same text, but separately. So I didn't feel like I was busting their balls in front of an audience. Neither of them responded to me. I'm sure they just have day shift ham-fisting it together, but I wasn't going to do it last night. So that's where we're at. But I talked to him and I was like, guys, why don't you just repin the fucking connector? You know what I mean? Instead of cutting the fucking wiring harness out of the goddamn vehicle, cutting wires off and moving labels and cutting terminations and re-terminating shit, and you could have just repinned the fucking connector. Anyway, that's my job. So I'm pretty wrung out right now. So I'm just sitting here in my chair, staring at my pile of junk in the back of my truck that I can't get rid of, and talking to dipshit electricians that can't seem to orchestrate getting a fucking power pole put in for me for $2,300. So I think I might just ride around on my motorcycle a little bit. I think that's the only thing that's going to make this better. Yeah, later.